Hey everybody, it's Ben, and I'm back once again with another video for you guys. Today I'll be reviewing A Voice in the Dark, issues 1 through 3. This series is written, illustrated, toned and coloured by Larime Taylor, and it's published through Image Comics, Top Cow Productions and through Minotaur Press. Now, a quick note about Larime Taylor: this is his first published work, and he suffers from a birth defect called arthrogryposis, which means he has very little use of his arms and his legs, and he's in a wheelchair as a result of it. And so everything that I just mentioned that he does for this book, he does everything with his mouth. And once you open the page to this book and you actually start reading it and taking in his artwork, this series is really something special, and this series is something that everybody needs to check out and everybody needs to be reading. So our story starts out and we meet our main character of Zoe Aarons, who is an 18-year-old girl who is going to be starting a scholarship at Blair College. She's your normal 18-year-old kid. She's an honor student. She always gets high grades, and she's trying to move away to keep her much darker and a much more sinister side of herself in check. Now Zoe has killed someone. She's taken someone's life. Now call it protection, call it revenge, call it what you want, but Zoe has taken someone's life. And you quickly find out that the reason why she's killed this person is because she's outed her best friend, then turned shortly thereafter adopted sister 7, after she was outed to the entire school by this person that Zoe's murdered as being a lesbian. And after that, her parents basically disowned her after the school counsellor basically informed her parents by accident. And so Zoe and her family have decided to take her best friend Jazz, or turned adopted sister 7, into their own family. And you quickly meet Zoe's parents and her adopted sister 7, as Zoe is going for an interview to do with the the radio what's the word the radio building in which she's going to be hosting and presenting a talk show, which is called Kill Campus Radio, which ties into the very first broadcast which Zoe performs later on in this issue. Unfortunately, Zoe is finding it very hard to keep her murderous instincts in check. Now, Zoe was never abused as a child, she was never violent, she never tortured animals, but she did read books about serial killers, and she would reenact their crimes in her imagination. And eventually, as you've seen from the first page of this first issue, imagination just wasn't enough, and then she was given the motivation to take someone's life. And as a result, like I said, she's having trouble keeping those tendencies in check, because she imagines herself strangling the interviewer that she's when she believes that she's going to laugh at her proposed idea for a call-in or a talk show, which Zoe wants to do as an outlet in order to keep her, as I said, her darker side of herself, or the darker side of her personality, in check. And so as a result of it, there's just some really great scenes which really make you think, is Zoe, is she crazy, is she insane, is it an alternate personality, is it, but anyway, there's another great scene where Zoe is actually talking to her reflection in the bathroom mirror, and she believes this to be a personification of her dark side as she's talking back to her. And as I said, you really start to wonder, is she crazy? Is it an alternate personality? Or is it just the darker side of her reflection coming out and talking back to her in the mirror? At the same time, you also meet, later on in the issue, you meet Zoe's uncle Ezekiel, who is a homicide detective in the Cutter Circle town where Zoe's campus is based. But at the same time, you also meet our secondary characters for this series, which are in the form of Zoe's roommates. The first of which we're introduced to is the character of Ash, and then we're introduced to Krista and Mona shortly thereafter. I'll just try and find the page where we meet Zoe's uncle Azazel. Oh, there's another great scene where, speaking of her murderous tendencies, where she imagines herself literally stabbing one of her fellow classmates in the forehead with a pen because this particular classmate says something untoward and pretty uncalled for actually towards gay people, and as a result Zoe imagines herself basically stabbing her in the forehead with her pen. And then we actually meet Ezekiel, who is, as I said, Zoe's uncle, who is also a homicide detective in Cutter Circle, which is the town in which excuse me, Zoe's campus is actually located. At the same time, you also have Zoe imagining herself basically thinking of half a dozen ways in order to kill her flatmates within 48 hours. And all of this is done, all of this is documented, I should say, in journals or diaries that Zoe is keeping, which also functions as not only a written narrative, but also a quite possibly an outlet for her internal thoughts or internal monologue throughout this first issue. Unfortunately, you quickly find out that not all is as it seems, and there's actually another serial killer which is operating in Cutter Circle at the same time that Zoe is starting to attend college. And here's a great two-page spread of Zoe actually imagining killing the rest of her roommates, which we have Krista on the left-hand page, and then we have Mona on the right-hand, as you can see there. Sorry, I'm having to just readjust the camera slightly, or the issue I should say. And then shortly thereafter we have Zoe actually starting her first radio show broadcast, but unfortunately you do get she does get a troll ring up for the first caller, which is an anonymous call-in talk show where people can talk about their deepest worries, their deepest secrets, their deepest desires. She does get a troll ring up for the first time, and then she starts to get actual sort of proper callers in, if you will. But unfortunately her third caller that she gets admits to Zoe under the assumed name of Veronica during this first broadcast that she is contemplating suicide. And that's where our first issue ultimately leaves off, which then segues directly into issue number 2, which we then pick up with our third anonymous caller who is contemplating suicide. And as a result, you have basically Zoe trying to sort of counsel this girl and find out exactly as to why she is contemplating committing suicide. You start out in the present, and then you flash back to the conversation between the girl who's assumed the name of Heather in this anonymous phone call. Bear with me guys, I'm just flicking through my notes. There we are. Unfortunately, this anonymous call which Heather is contemplating suicide, I should point out that all of the dialogue and all of the exchanges between the characters all feels really natural and really human, and it's written as though as you and I would talk, meaning myself and my viewers of this video, that all of the dialogue feels very human, and all of the characters feel very human, and as I said, they all talk like you or I would talk, which gives this book another level of immersion, because you're actually pulled into everything that these characters are saying, which is a compliment to Larime Taylor's fantastic writing, as well as his equally fantastic artwork and his use of his tone as well, in terms of how he illustrates his artwork, as well as the lettering as well, which is very, very clear and very easy to understand. And he also uses different sort of types of lettering. For example, you have a different type of lettering between a text message and then a different type for obviously written dialogue exchanges. But yeah, all of the character interactions feel really, really human, especially between you know, Zoe and her classmate, Zoe and her uncle Ezekiel, as well as Zoe under the assumed name of Veronica, and Heather, who's her third anonymous caller. All of the dialogue seems really, really human, like I said, which is a great compliment of how great and how fantastic Larime Taylor's writing is and his storytelling. Unfortunately, Zoe's third caller, something very horrible and very tragic happens, and I'm just going to make sure that I don't spoil this, because I don't want to spoil anything, because I want you guys to pick this up and read it for yourselves. But the situation which Heather takes us through is a very human and a very relatable situation in terms of how she's gotten to this point. It all starts out with some friends at a party, you know, with beer or alcohol and drinking and having a good time. Unfortunately, it takes a turn for the worse, and then as a result of that, you have Heather's guilt over what happened to the girl in question at this particular party, and you also have another, unfortunately, relatable situation, which is a more darker and more sinister situation, which sometimes females do sometimes find themselves in, unfortunately. But like I said, unfortunately, the call goes horribly wrong, and you have Zoe's initial ensuing guilt shortly thereafter. As I said, I don't want to spoil anything. Just quickly flip over the page. There we are. And you then have Zoe basically concluding this particular sort of volume or entry in her diary, and that's where our second issue leaves off. And we then pick up with issue number 3, which is our third and final issue for this video. And issue number 3, Zoe is still in shock after the events of the ending of the last issue, and so she now has to deal with not only the personal guilt ramifications of it, but also ramifications in terms of what her college wants to do about her radio talk show, but specifically the organizer of the various radio shows that the students and fellow radio hosts and DJs host on a regular basis. But it turns out that Jen, the administrator for the radio shows and the hosts and whatnot, she actually wants Zoe's show to actually continue, but she just basically says that we need to basically put into place some more safeguards, and you need to be a bit more discreet, especially as what's happened in the last issue. The caller in question's family was well known in town, and so to avoid a media scandal and avoid further potential legal action, she now informs Zoe that she needs to basically run the show after hours and make sure that anybody that knows about the show, she just needs to keep them quiet and not to let on that the show is still going on. As I said, all of these characters feel very, very human, and as I said, the dialogue exchanges is equally just as engrossing and engaging, because they all talk as you and I would talk. And so you would then have Zoe meeting up with her classmates for lunch and basically explaining the situation about the radio show, saying that you know, if you could keep it quiet, I'd appreciate it. I'm still going to do the show, but I just need to be more careful. And all the characters in this, they all have their own unique look in terms of how they're drawn and illustrated by Larime Taylor, and they all are drawn to look very beautiful and very, as I said, all look more, how can I explain it? They look more human as opposed to sort of regular comic book characters. And as I said, they all look beautiful, especially the character of Ash, who is the goth or the punk. What can I say? I have a type, don't judge me. But yeah, they all look just beautiful characters in terms of how they're drawn. And it's flattering, really, that obviously they're drawn in such a way by Larime Taylor as well. As I said, I'm not going to spoil any more of this story, because I want you guys to pick this up and read it for yourselves. But there's a really great shocking and surprise reveal at the end of issue 3, which I'm sure will segue very nicely into the next issue, which is issue 4. Now, I will start out by saying that I have the utmost respect for Larime Taylor, as he has a disability, but this hasn't stopped him from doing something that he wants to do, and very clearly is something that he's very passionate about. As this series was actually launched through a Kickstarter campaign, and then was picked up by Image, Top Cow, and Minotaur Press in terms of being published. As I said, the writing is fantastic, the artwork is fantastic, the use of his tone to illustrate his artwork is also fantastic, and the lettering is also really well done. And like I said, Larime uses different types of lettering to obviously differentiate between, say, a text message and, as I said, written dialogue. The story itself is really engaging, it's really intriguing, it's engrossing, it's compelling. It makes you want to basically turn every single page in order to find out what's going to happen next. And I found this to be the very same way all the way through issues 1 to 3 of this series so far. The art style is simple, but it suits the book right down to the ground. It's a very complimentary art style in terms of Larime Taylor's writing, and I have to thank once again Madame Comics, Stephen McKee, and the Mahoney Show, Sam Mahoney, for basically making me aware of this series through one of the episodes of the Boys podcast, which I believe is episode number 5, and they were talking about the fact that this series might possibly be getting cancelled as of possibly issue 7. I really don't want this to happen, as this is a really special series, as this is a series that doesn't come along very often. As I said, this is a fantastic series, and I highly recommend check it out if you haven't already. And it would be a crying shame if this series was to get cancelled, like I said, because books like this don't come along very often. I will leave a link to the Boys podcast episode in question in the description. I will also leave a link to an interview with Larime Taylor about the book itself, and about the Kickstarter campaign, and about his sources of reference in terms of his art style, and you can actually see him performing some of the illustration during the video interview as well. So I'll leave that in the description as well. If you're a fan of indie comics, if you're a fan of TV shows like Dexter, Hannibal, if you're into psychology, if you're studying it, for example, in college or university, or if you're just intrigued by the darker side of the human psyche, or if you're somebody who likes to support new writers and new artists in the comics industry, or if you're somebody that follows creators based off of a work that they've done, like I said, either from a writing or a storytelling, a writing or an artwork point of view. If you're just looking for something different to read and something that's fantastic to read and it makes you want the next issue, I'll give you an example. I read issues 1 to 2 of this, and I immediately wanted more. I then jumped into issue 3. I've read this series now 4 times, and I cannot wait for issue 4, and this series is definitely going on my pull list, and I'm going to try and promote and share this series with as many people as I possibly can, because I highly recommend people check this out, and I want more people to read it. And so from the single issue sales, then Image, Top Cow, and Minotaur Press know that there is a demand for this series, and the series will keep getting published. Anyway, in closing, thank you everybody for watching. If I had to give issues 1 to 3 of A Voice in the Dark a rating, I would give it an absolute 5 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. I'd highly recommend it to anyone, as I said, for all the reasons I've just outlined. Thank you everybody for watching. Hope you all enjoyed the video. As always, if you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Didn't like it, thumbs it down. But as I always say, if you thumbs down the video, by all means, please feel free to tell me why in the comments below, or send me a private message. And if it's your first time here, by all means, please feel free to click the button which says subscribe down there near the description. And until next time, this is Scambit896 signing off, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care, guys.